Hello everyone, welcome to my Crystal Realms first impressions. So originally I made my original Crystal Realms first impression on a podcast, and that's what my Bree World's first impression and Pixel Planet first impression videos were, but those are just like highlights of a podcast I did on a live stream, and it's a little hard to gather my thoughts there. And I was gonna just re-upload, the same thing that I did for those videos, because I already had that Crystal Realms highlight, but since I'm kind of in the swing of things and making commentary videos, I thought I'd just kind of reiterate my thoughts in a new video, try to make my thoughts maybe a little bit more concise. I actually wrote down quite a bit from that original first impression to talk about, so it might be less concise, but I just want to jump into Crystal Realms and also give my audience a chance to think about Crystal Realms, go check it out for themselves, because I know there wasn't a lot of love on the poll. I think that's just because I haven't even played it on the channel, so people are like, okay, I don't care about Crystal Realms, I've never played that game before. So yeah, let's jump into it. So first of all, the music is great. I love it. It's lovely. It's very chill. I don't remember what it reminded me of, but I had a good impression of the music. That was great. One thing, a little note, and this still continues to this day, that original first impression was in January, and it's, May 1st when this is going to be uploaded, so it's been a bit, but the hit effect is still kind of repetitive. Over long periods of time, that can be a little bit grating, the whoosh, 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 whoosh. Some games make the sound randomized through a couple of very similar sounds, or they pitch up the sound effect differently and randomize between those. I think, classic like Terraria or Minecraft, those sorts of games will, when there's a lot of breaking over and over again, I'm sure Stardew Valley is something like that, breaking over and over again, or planting sounds or whatever, you can change up the sound effect very slightly. I'm not super into game development necessarily, so I don't know how difficult that would be, or I guess that would specifically be sound design, but that's one of my recommendations after having had my first impression of the game. I think this is definitely the most unique. I mentioned Nexus Station's pretty different as a sandbox MMO, but it is very different and in a very different direction. If you're going towards the more closely related games like Growtopia and Pixel Worlds, I think Crystal Realms is the most wild and alien, but I think it's really interesting. That's what I love about it. It's so different. It's a lot like Terraria, more like Terraria than any other sandbox MMO that has been created. It's got this massive world, again, I think the biggest world that any sandbox MMO has tried. It's got trees that grow, which is cool. You can plant them and regrow them. And again, that's kind of a weird mechanic because in these normal sandbox MMOs, things are just static. You either place them or you break them, and that's just how they are. But with the tree mechanic, you can spring, blocks into your world. It's kind of crazy. I don't know if there's like certain grow standards where you can't, if there's blocks placed just about above a certain point, you can't grow them past that. And that's how they fix that issue of the grow mechanics messing with the builds or something like that somehow. But yeah, I'm sure they figured that out. That's what I'm just saying. It's got some interesting mechanics. And of course, the biggest one for me, which is interesting, is there's enemies that you can find in your personal world. You don't have to go to Secret Base or Netherworld or, Growtopia dungeons, whatever that is. You can find them in your world exploring and walking around and fighting them. Notably, there's slimes and skeletons in the main world. I haven't adventured too much into different worlds. I remember there's a sand world, but I don't remember what the other enemies necessarily are, but those are the ones you're going to be facing in your default worlds. I'm excited to see what they do with more enemy types for sure. The next thing is probably my personal favorite part about the entire game is just the quests early on were so satisfying to complete. You got this massive quest line of things you can go through, evolving through different pickaxes and ores and smelting and different crafting stations, and it really guides you along, but it's so satisfying and fun to get those rewards and see that little part of the quest tab, get knocked off another, it's just the checklist amount of it is so fun, so great. The next thing is the locks. So the locks are variants of different types of crystals, very different sizes of crystals. So instead of, again, world locks, you got world crystals, and I don't remember, I think they're just small crystal, medium crystal, that sort of thing for the sizes. And yeah, I think it's Crystal Realms, and they have this crystal feature. There's also the gems sort of currency are also crystals, so you've seen gimmicks like bread for Breadverse becoming a little overwhelming or just wrong for the game, but they kept it simple, and they didn't keep it in the characters. They didn't make an alien crystal character. Locks are crystals. I think making specifically the gems and the locks for crystals become crystals is an interesting way to do the gimmick. They're not not changing the character, they're changing the other things that are really colloquially known with these sandbox MMOs. World locks, I say, are like, for Minecraft, they're the creeper, or like, it's like the quintessential element of a sandbox MMO is the world lock, this shiny golden square. So them changing that meta up and making it their own, I think is cool. And then of course gems, that goes even beyond sandbox MMOs. You got gems everywhere in all different shapes and sizes. But I think making them crystals is just a fun extra thing. It makes it a little bit more unique. The social aspect is great. Of course, it's pretty typical compared to other sandbox MMOs, but I think the community is already showing to be very supportive to newcomers and different people. I had this one person join my world, and they gave me a bunch of tips, so that was really cool to have. One of those was this cute trick where you can place torches around and explore these caves because they are dark, but what you can also do is chip the background a bit, and you can let in the light from the true world's background, because the world background emits light to some extent, and you can let the light in instead of placing torches and crafting materials for that. So I thought that was a really cute little feature. Another thing is for the early profitable game loop, as far as I know, and this might have changed because it's been a few months, but I think it mainly is the same, is what you're going to want to do is travel to a bunch of different worlds and break their ores for crystals. And of course you'll also get ores so you can upgrade your tools and stuff like that. So it's kind of a win-win. You get the ores, you get the crystals. But that's another thing that person let me know about. I wish worlds and progression could be more self-contained. And I know it's kind of too late for that in Crystal Realms, but I just wish you could progress through all the quests and do a bunch of that stuff just sitting in the same world, because eventually what you're going to have to do is go outside of your world and go from world to world to world, killing enemies or mining ores and doing that. And of course, you think about a game with like Terraria, which is not an online MMO, so I can't even imagine the nightmare that would be trying to get a world that size. But you can kind of just chill and make the world your own and keep exploring it and doing all that sort of thing, which they, I think, have remedied a bit by making, you can make portals to different worlds, like the sand world, and I think there's a snow world now, so you can still have that sense of exploration, and there's like little, I wouldn't say dungeons, but there's little structures you can find in those worlds. And I know in the sand world there's one structure you can go into and explore, which I think is really cool still. So they're still keeping that alive. And pretty much the last thing I have to mention is just there's an ID system for the worlds, so you can call your world whatever you want, but there's a actual hidden ID, so you can still have the same name as another world, but it won't like overwrite it, right? So it's really not too daunting. You might think it's a little confusing or annoying to have an ID system, but when you're just starting out, there is an owned worlds tab when you finally get a world crystal, and then you can also go to recent worlds. The only problem is if you're starting out and then you again go to all those different worlds to go get ores and crystals and stuff, you really need to save that original world ID somewhere, write it down if you're going to jump into Crystal Realms, and you're going to do that before you get a world crystal, because you might lose the world. You might just never know what it was. There could be some way to try to find that again. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if there's like a data bank of like all the names of one particular world, and then you can go one by one, or I have no idea how that works. I could not tell you how to save that. I would just recommend writing that ID down somewhere. But yeah, those were my Crystal Realms first impressions. I think this is really an evolved version of Pixel Worlds or Growtopia. I really am so excited to see what direction it takes, and I'm excited to cover it on this channel. So that brings us to a total like 4 games. We got, technically Project Reboot and OGPS, which are just Pixel Worlds, and then of course we got now Bloxia and Crystal Realms, and I'm so excited to cover them. And let me know, please go check out Crystal Realms. I really want to know what you think, and let me know in the comments what you thought about the game. If you've played it already, if you're going to play it, and circle back to this video and let me know what you think. You can join their Discord. I'm sure you can just Google Crystal Realms Discord. It's definitely just going to pop up from that, so feel free to do that and join their community. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye.